I woke up with a needle stuck in my flesh, poison burning in my veins. He, the man I swore to love, held the syringe, ready to kill me for a life insurance policy. At 70 years old, I reveal how I escaped the monster who planned my demise. Before I share how I escaped death, I ask you to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. My story is for those who have felt betrayal or fear. Every subscription gives a voice to survivors like me, showing that we can be reborn. Join us. I am 70 years old, and there are stories that time cannot erase. There are scars that remain, open even after 4 decades have passed. My name is Eleanor Vance, and what I'm about to tell you changed the course of my life forever. It was 1983. I was 30 years old, and I worked at the London Metropolitan Bank. I was an independent woman with a solid career, my own apartment in the Chelsea neighborhood, and a salary that allowed me to help my family. But there was something I lacked, something that gnawed at me inside every day. To be a mother. Oh, my dears, you don't know what it was like back then to be a 30-year-old single woman with no children. The pitying glances from the neighbors, the whispered comments at the bakery, the persistent questions from my aunts at family gatherings. When are the children coming, Eleanor? Time is running out for you, dear. At your age, your mother already had 3 children. Every word was like a stab to the heart. For 5 years, I had battled endometriosis. Doctors had told me it would be very difficult to conceive. That word, difficult, had become a thorn lodged in my heart. Every month, I desperately waited for the delay that never came. Every visit to the gynecologist brought new disappointments. You have to keep trying, Eleanor, Dr. Davies would tell me in his paternal voice. Medicine is advancing a lot. Don't lose hope. But hope was slipping through my fingers like sand. At 30, when all my friends already had their babies, I felt incomplete, broken, as if the most important piece of my life's puzzle was missing. I had set aside romances to focus on my career, convinced that love would come at the right time. But now that I had the financial stability, a respectable position at the bank and my own apartment, all I wanted was to start a family. At work, I was known as the Bachelorette. Younger colleagues would joke about my personal life, asking when I was going to tie the knot with some man. Eleanor is married to her job, they would say, laughing. It's easier to fall in love with a balance sheet than with her. I would smile and continue with my tasks, but inside my soul was breaking. How could they understand that it wasn't that I didn't want love, but that I hadn't found the right man? My parents, poor dears, also suffered in silence. My mother, who had been a very fertile woman and had 4 children, couldn't understand why I couldn't give her grandchildren. In my day, she would tell me, women didn't have these problems. We ate well, worked in the fields, and children just came. It was her way of trying to help, but it only made me feel more defective. That's why I decided to go on a spiritual retreat in the Scottish Highlands. My sister, Catherine, had told me about that sacred place where many women had found answers to their deepest problems. Eleanor, she said, you have to go. Miracles have happened there. I know 3 women who went there unable to have children and now have large families. It was March 1983. It was cold, and I had just come out of surgery to treat my endometriosis. The operation had been more complicated than expected. Dr. Davies had to remove several cysts and clear my fallopian tubes. It's your last chance, Eleanor, he had told me seriously. If this doesn't work, we'll have to consider other options. I needed answers. I needed hope. The Abbey of Glencoe had always been a special place for me. My grandmother used to take me there when I was a child, and I had always felt a special peace among those sacred mountains. I had been there twice before, once when my grandfather died, and another time when I was deciding whether to leave my first job for the bank. Both times I had found the clarity I was looking for. It was an expensive retreat, costing £15,000 for a week, but I could afford it. Working 13 years at the bank had given me some financial leeway. I had my savings, my apartment almost paid off, and a salary that allowed me small luxuries like this. It's an investment in your future, I told myself as I wrote the check. If God wants you to be a mother, this is where you'll find out. I remember the train journey from London to Glasgow, and then the bus winding through the mountains until we reached the Abbey. It was an imposing building of grey stone that seemed to sprout from the mountain itself. The rooms were simple but clean, with a single bed, a crucifix on the wall, and a window overlooking the snowy peaks. The first day was for adjustment. There were about 30 of us, mostly women, though there were some men too. Ages ranged from 25 to 60. We had all come there looking for something: healing, direction, spiritual peace, answers to questions we didn't know how to formulate. The routine was strict but comforting. We woke up at 6 in the morning for lauds, had silent breakfast at 7, spiritual conferences until noon, lunch, rest, more conferences in the afternoon, dinner at 8, and compline at 9 before going to bed. It was as if time had stopped, as if the outside world with its noises and hurries didn't exist. On the second day, we had what they called inner healing sessions. We were divided into small groups, and each person had to share what had brought them there. When it was my turn, my voice broke. "I want to be a mother," I said simply. "I'm 30 years old. I've been trying for 5 years. I've had surgery. I've done everything the doctors told me, but nothing happens. I'm starting to think that God doesn't want me to have children." An elderly nun, Sister Agnes, approached me after that session. She was a small woman, about 60, with very blue eyes and a smile that radiated kindness. "My dear," she said, placing her hands on mine, "I see great suffering in your heart, but I also see hope. God has plans for you, plans for good, and not for evil." It was on the third day that something happened that changed my life forever. We had a special prayer session for physical healing. Sister Agnes led the prayer, and one by one we came forward to receive the laying on of hands. When it was my turn, I knelt before her, my heart beating so loudly I thought everyone could hear it. Sister Agnes placed her hands on my head and began to pray in a low voice. Suddenly, her voice grew stronger, clearer. "Daughter," she said, "the Lord is showing me something for you. I see healing in your body. I see restored fertility. You will have a baby boy, and his name will be Daniel. He will be a strong, healthy child, and he will bring great joy to your life." I cried like a child. It was exactly what I needed to hear. Not just the promise of a child, but the specific details. A boy named Daniel. For the first time in years, I felt that there was real, tangible hope. The other women in the group hugged me, cried with me, prayed for me. It was as if I had received a direct promise from heaven. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the monastery gardens under the moonlight, feeling for the first time in years that my future made sense. "Daniel," I whispered to the wind. "My son Daniel." I could already imagine him. A boy with brown hair like mine. Big, curious eyes. Arms that would cling to my neck when I lifted him. It was that same week that I met him. His name was Arthur Sterling. He was 45 years old, and he was a veterinarian. I saw him for the first time in the dining hall, sitting at a table near mine. He was an attractive man, medium height, graying hair and a smile that lit up his entire face. He dressed elegantly but soberly, as befitted the sacred place where we were. During meals at the retreat, we were seated at different tables each day, as was the custom to encourage attendees to meet each other. The system worked like this. You arrived at the dining hall and were assigned a seat according to a list that rotated daily. It was a clever way to ensure that we all interacted and didn't stay in our comfort groups. On the fourth day, I happened to sit at the same table as Arthur. There were 4 other diners, an elderly lady from Edinburgh who was there for family problems, a young man who was considering entering the seminary, a middle-aged couple with marital issues, and the 2 of us. The conversation flowed naturally. "Where in the UK are you from?" Arthur asked me in a deep, melodious voice. "From London," I replied. "And you?" "I live in Manchester now," he said. "But I have a veterinary clinic in London, near where my parents live." My heart skipped a beat. London was my city. We talked throughout the meal about our lives. He told me that he had been widowed 2 years prior, that he had 3 children. One lived in Australia, working for a livestock company, and the other 2 were still with him. The eldest was 20 and studying veterinary medicine like him, and the youngest was 17 and finishing high school. "It's difficult raising children alone," he confessed as he broke bread, "especially a teenage daughter. Sometimes I feel like I don't know what to do, that she needs a mother figure in her life." His eyes filled with a genuine sadness that touched my soul. I asked him about his wife. "She died of cancer," he simply said. "It was very fast, barely 6 months from diagnosis to the end. The children and I are still learning to live without her." There was something in the way he spoke of his pain that made me want to comfort him, hug him, tell him that everything would be all right. Over the next few days, our conversations grew deeper. We shared the same love for animals, the same religious devotion, the same family values. Arthur told me funny stories from his work as a veterinarian, curious cases of pets with unique personalities, emotional moments when he had to help families say goodbye to their 4-legged companions. "And you?" he asked me one afternoon as we walked through the monastery gardens. "Why are you here? What are you looking for in this sacred place?" I told him about my struggle with infertility, about my desperation to be a mother, about the revelation I had received from Sister Agnes. I didn't mention the specific details about the baby boy named Daniel, but I did tell him about my renewed hope. "You are a very special woman, Eleanor," he said, stopping by an ancient stone fountain. "Any child would be lucky to have you as a mother. I can see it in the way you talk about your future child, in the light that shines in your eyes when you mention motherhood." One night after Compline, Arthur approached me in the courtyard. He was more nervous than usual, as if he had something important to tell me. "Eleanor," he began, "I know we've only known each other for a few days, but I feel a special connection with you. When we return to London, I'd like to visit your parish. I'm a widower, but my faith is still important to me, and I'm looking for a place to worship with my children." At that moment, everything seemed like a divine sign. A Christian man, hard-working, a widower with children who needed a mother, who also lived in my city. It was as if God had orchestrated our meeting. "I'd love that," I replied. "Our parish is small but very welcoming. I'm sure you'd feel comfortable there." On the last day of the retreat, we exchanged phone numbers. Arthur wrote his on a piece of paper in his careful handwriting. "Arthur Sterling, veterinarian, London." He also gave me the address of his clinic, which was indeed in a neighborhood near where my parents lived. "Eleanor," he said as we waited for the bus that would take us back to the real world. "These days have been very special for me. It's been a long time since I felt so at peace, so hopeful about the future." He took my hand gently. "I hope we can maintain this friendship when we return." The journey back to London was like returning from a beautiful dream to everyday reality. But I carried with me two treasures: Sister Agnes's promise about my future son Daniel, and Arthur's friendship, who seemed to be exactly the kind of man I had been waiting for all my life. When we returned to London, we started talking on the phone every day. Arthur was very insistent about seeing me, but I had my reservations. I had just had major surgery and needed time to recover completely. Besides, although I was attracted to him, I wanted to go slowly, get to know him better, before getting emotionally involved. But he was persistent, affectionate, attentive in a way no man had ever been with me before. He sent me flowers at the bank with cards that said things like, "Thinking of you," or "Hope you have a blessed day." My colleagues were intrigued. "Eleanor has a secret admirer," they joked. "Let's see if we'll finally have a wedding at the bank." He also called me every day to ask how I felt after the operation. "Did you take your medication? Did you rest enough? Do you need me to bring you anything?" It was like having a guardian angel who cared about every detail of my well-being. A week after our return, he called me with urgency in his voice. It was a Friday night. I had just gotten home after a particularly difficult day at the bank. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something important. I didn't want to tell you this so soon, but I feel like we're drifting apart, and I can't let that happen." My heart raced. All week I had noticed that our phone conversations were getting shorter, that I was more reserved. It was my defense mechanism, my way of protecting myself from the possibility of getting hurt. "What's wrong, Arthur?" I asked him. "I had a revelation in Glen Coe," he said with a trembling voice. "I didn't want to tell you because I thought you might think I was crazy, but I can't keep this secret anymore. The same night you received your special prayer with Sister Agnes, I had a vision during my personal prayer." My breath caught. "What kind of vision?" "I saw that we would have a child together, Eleanor, a beautiful and strong boy. And I clearly heard his name, Daniel." At that moment, I felt the world stop. It was exactly the same revelation I had received from Sister Agnes. How was such a coincidence possible? Two people receiving the same specific vision in the same sacred place at the same time. For me, that could only mean one thing. It was God's will. "Arthur," I whispered, "you won't believe what happened to me." And I told him everything. Sister Agnes's laying on of hands, the promise of the baby boy, the name Daniel. When I finished speaking, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "My God," he finally murmured. "Eleanor, this can't be a coincidence. It's a divine confirmation. We are meant to be together, to form a family together." His voice filled with emotion. "Now I understand why I felt so drawn to you from the first moment I saw you. It wasn't just physical or emotional attraction, it was a spiritual calling." I didn't tell him about my own revelation immediately, but deep down I knew with absolute certainty that I had found the father of my future child. It was as if all the pieces of a cosmic puzzle had fit together perfectly. My infertility, my years of waiting, my desperation, everything had been preparation for this moment, for this man, for this child who would come. That night I couldn't sleep. I walked around my apartment feeling a mixture of euphoria and terror. Euphoria because I finally saw God's plan for my life with crystal clarity. Terror because it meant I would have to open my heart completely, risk everything for this divine promise. The surgery was scheduled for March 21st, just a week after that revealing conversation. It was a follow-up operation to clean up some scar tissue left from the first surgery. Dr. Davies had explained that it was necessary to maximize my chances of conception. Arthur insisted on accompanying me. "I want to be with you at this important moment," he told me when I mentioned it. "I know this operation will be the bridge to our miracle." There was something in the way he said, "our miracle," that filled me with hope and love. Never had a man shown so much interest in my well-being, in my deepest dreams. On the day of the operation, my mother and my best friend, Sarah, accompanied me to St. Thomas's Hospital in London. It was very early, 6 in the morning, and I was nervous as always before any medical procedure. But Arthur was also there. He had traveled from Manchester, where he claimed to have some business, just to be with me. "You didn't have to come," I told him when I saw him in the waiting room, elegantly dressed in a gray suit and a navy tie. "Of course I had to come," he replied, taking my hands. "We're going to be a family, Eleanor. Your well-being is my well-being. Your dreams are my dreams." My mother was delighted with him. "What an attentive man," she whispered to me when Arthur stepped away to buy coffee for everyone. "In my 40 years of marriage to your father, I've rarely seen him so solicitous. You found a good man, dear." Sarah, who was more suspicious by nature, looked at me with some concern. "Don't you think it's all a bit fast, Eleanor? You've only known him for a week." But I was so in love, so convinced that it was divine will, that I dismissed her concerns. "Sarah, when God puts someone in your path, you know it immediately. You don't need years to recognize your destiny." The operation was successful. Dr. Davies managed to remove all the problematic tissue and completely clear my fallopian tubes. "Now you have the best chances we could give you," he told me when I woke up from the anesthesia. "Your body is ready to conceive." During my recovery, Arthur took care of everything with a dedication that moved me to tears. He brought me my medications at the exact time, prepared nutritious and healing meals for me, and helped me with the incision dressings. Since he was a veterinarian, he knew exactly what to do, how to manage wounds, how to administer medications. "You're like an angel," I told him as he expertly and gently dressed my incisions. "No one has ever taken care of me like this." And it was true. Even as a child when I got sick, my parents did what they could. But we were a humble family and didn't have the knowledge or resources for such specialized care. My parents were absolutely delighted with Arthur. He came home every day, brought gifts for my mother, talked about football with my father, played with my nephews when they visited. It was as if he had been part of the family all his life. "Eleanor has found a prince," my mother told the neighbors. "He's educated, hardworking, Christian, and you can tell he adores her. And he's a veterinarian, imagine, such a respectable profession." In those days, being a veterinarian had a very high social status. It was a difficult university career, required complex medical knowledge, and guaranteed good income. My father, who was a man of few words but a good observer, also approved of Arthur. "I like that man," he told me one day, while Arthur played football in the yard with my nephews. "He seems to have good values, to know what he wants in life, and above all, he seems to truly love you." Arthur had conquered not only my heart, but also my entire family. He met my siblings, my sisters-in-law, my aunts, He participated in our Sunday gatherings after Mass, helped my mother in the kitchen, patiently listened to my grandmother's repetitive stories. He was the perfect son-in-law every family dreams of having. After a month of recovery, I was able to return to my apartment in Chelsea. It was a small but cozy flat that I had bought with my bank savings. It had 2 bedrooms, a living room with a balcony overlooking the street, and a kitchen that I had renovated the year before. It was my pride, my first great achievement as an independent woman. Arthur moved in with me. I, who had never allowed any man to live in my house, made an exception for him. He was different, special, destined by God to be in my life. Everything seemed so natural, so right, as if I had been waiting all my life for him to arrive and complete my home. He took care of me like no one ever had before. He woke me up with breakfast ready, toast with homemade jam, freshly squeezed orange juice, coffee with milk in the cup that had belonged to my grandmother. He brought me my medications on time, always with a glass of fresh water and a smile. He accompanied me to medical checkups, taking notes of everything the doctor said. But there was something else that had me on cloud 9. Arthur had proposed, to me just 2 weeks after I recovered from the operation. It was a simple but beautiful proposal. We were having dinner on my small balcony, with candles lit and the sound of the London street in the background. "Eleanor," he said, taking my hands across the table, "these months with you have been the happiest of my life since Mary died." Mary was the name of his late wife. "I know it's fast, but at our age, we don't have time to waste. Will you marry me?" He gave me a beautiful ring, an emerald surrounded by small diamonds that, according to him, he had bought on his last trip to Manchester. "I want you to wear it on the right finger from now on," he said as he put it on me. "For me, we are already husband and wife before God. The civil registry paper is just a formality." I was on cloud 9. After so many years focused only on my career, convinced that true love was something that only happened in movies, I had finally found my soulmate. Arthur was everything I had dreamed of in a husband. Intelligent, loving, financially stable, devoted, and with experience as a father. "Yes," I said with tears of happiness rolling down my cheeks. "Yes, I want to marry you, Arthur. I want to start a family with you, raise our Daniel together, grow old by your side." That night we made love for the first time, and Arthur prayed over my womb, asking for our son to be conceived that very night. However, as the weeks passed, I began to notice certain subtle changes in the dynamic of our relationship. Arthur had very specific schedules and wanted me to adapt to them. "A good wife should be available to her husband," he explained patiently but firmly. "It's important that we synchronize our routines to build a harmonious life together." I had to be ready to have breakfast together at 7 sharp every morning. No staying in bed for 5 more minutes. No quick breakfast, because I was running, late for work. "Breakfast is the most important time of the day for a couple," he would tell me. "It's when we plan our day, when we connect spiritually before facing the world." I also had to be home for lunch at 1 o'clock. Arthur would come from the clinic to eat with me, and he expected me to have prepared something nutritious and tasty. If I was late from the bank, he would get visibly annoyed. "Eleanor," he would say with a tense smile, "one of the things I love most about you is your dedication to the home. I wouldn't want work to interfere with that." Dinners had to be at 8 o'clock sharp, always at the dining table, never in front of the television or in the kitchen. "Table manners are important," he explained. "When we have children, we want them to learn to eat properly, like a civilized family." At first, I thought it was wonderful to have a man who valued structured family life so much. I came from a family where we ate when we could, where there were no fixed routines because everyone worked different hours. The structure Arthur proposed seemed sophisticated, European, like the elegant families I saw in French films. He also began to question my job at the bank. "Eleanor, I've been thinking a lot about our future," he told me one night as we had soup and shepherd's pie for dinner. "The bank is no place for a woman who wants to be a mother. It's too much stress, too many hours, too much pressure. All that stress can affect your fertility." His argument sounded logical. I had read articles in women's magazines about how work stress could interfere with conception. "You should consider looking for something calmer," he continued. "Something that allows you to dedicate yourself to what really matters. Preparing to be a mother, taking care of your health, creating a serene environment in our home." "But Arthur," I said, "the bank is my career. I've worked 13 years to get where I am. I have a stable position, a good salary, social benefits. I can't just leave everything." He looked at me with an expression of disappointment that touched my soul. "Of course I understand your attachment to your job," he said, taking my hand. "But think about it from another perspective. My clinic is doing very well. I generate enough income to support us comfortably. You could dedicate yourself to something more personally satisfying, something that aligns with your true calling as a woman." By May, Arthur convinced me that we should look for a bigger apartment. "This place is beautiful," he said, looking at my small Chelsea flat. "But it's too small for when our baby arrives. We need space for a nursery, maybe a playroom, an area where Daniel can grow comfortably." We found a beautiful apartment in Notting Hill in London. It was much larger than mine, with 3 bedrooms, 2 full bathrooms, a spacious living room with a fireplace and a modern kitchen with all appliances. It was like a palace compared to my small Chelsea flat. "Here our son will have space to grow," Arthur would tell me as we walked through the empty rooms. "Imagine, Eleanor, that room will be Daniel's nursery. That other one can be his playroom when he's older." It was much more expensive than I could afford, but Arthur insisted that we could manage it together. "I'll cover most of the expenses," he promised me. "Your money is your money. Mine is our money. That's how it works when a man truly loves a woman." The problem was that to get the apartment, we needed a very high deposit. £30,000, all my saved money, including the severance pay I had received when changing banks the previous year, went into that deposit. £30,000 represented 2 years of my disciplined savings, all my financial security. "Don't worry, my love," Arthur reassured me as we signed the rental contract. "It's an investment in our future. Think of it as the first gift we give to our Daniel. A beautiful home to grow up in." His words reassured me, but a small voice inside whispered that it was too much money, too much risk. But things got more complicated when Arthur convinced me to leave my job at the bank. The final conversation on this topic happened one June evening after I arrived home especially tired from a difficult day. We had had a surprise audit and everyone was stressed. "Eleanor, look at you," Arthur said when he saw me arrive exhausted at 9 at night. "You're pale, hollow-eyed, tense. Your body is screaming that it needs rest. How can it conceive a baby in these conditions?" He hugged me, and I felt all my muscles relax. "I've been thinking. Your schedule doesn't allow us to spend time together as a couple should. Besides, I want you to dedicate yourself completely to preparing to be a mother." "But Arthur," I protested weakly, "I need to work. I have responsibilities, bills to pay, my share of the rent for this apartment. He cradled me as if I were a small child. Look, I earn enough from the veterinary clinic to support us comfortably, he explained. I have very exclusive clients in London, people with competition horses, pedigree dog breeders. My fees are high because I offer a specialized service. We can live well on my income while you focus on what really matters. His arguments were seductive. I had been dreaming for years of being able to dedicate myself to something more creative, more personal than spreadsheets and bank reports. You could study something you're passionate about, Arthur continued. Interior design, garden design, artistic baking, or simply dedicate yourself to preparing our home for Daniel's arrival. Against my better judgment, but convinced by his arguments and my exhaustion, I resigned from the bank in June. It was one of the stupidest decisions of my life, but at that moment, I was so in love, so convinced that Arthur was my destiny, that I didn't think clearly. All my colleagues told me I was crazy. Mr. Davison, my boss for 8 years, called me into his office for a final conversation. "Eleanor," he said with a father's seriousness, "you have a solid career here. You're one of our best employees. You have a future at this bank. Are you sure you want to throw all that away for a man you've known for 3 months?" "Mr. Davison," I replied with the arrogance of someone who believes they are in love, "I'm going to start a family. It's what I've always wanted. Work can wait, but a woman's fertile years cannot. Now, 40 years later, I am ashamed of my naivety, of how I confused dependence with love, control with care." Once I left work, Arthur became even more controlling, although at the time I interpreted it as increased attention and care. I had to be home for breakfast with him every morning at 7 sharp. If I woke up 5 minutes late, he was already dressed and looking worried. "Are you feeling well, my love? You're never late for breakfast." I had to have lunch with him every day at 1 o'clock. Arthur would close the clinic at 12:30 to come home and eat with me. He expected the food to be ready, hot, and well presented. "It's important that we maintain our rituals as a couple," he would explain. "That's how we build a solid foundation for our marriage." In the afternoons, I only had a few free hours, from 3 to 7, before he returned for dinner. "These are your personal hours," he would say generously. "You can do whatever you want. Go shopping, visit your parents, tidy the house, or simply rest to be beautiful when I return." We also started the famous fertility treatments. Arthur had spoken with Dr. Davies and they had agreed on a protocol of vitamins and medications that supposedly would increase my chances of conceiving. "Dr. Davies is very optimistic," Arthur informed me after his private consultation with him. "He says that with this treatment and a little patience, we'll have news very soon." Every morning, after breakfast, he would give me the pills personally. There was a specific routine. First the prenatal vitamins, then the folic acid, then the iron pills, and finally some special capsules that, according to him, regulated my hormones. "It's important that you take them at the exact time," he would say, as he counted each pill in his hand. "Consistency is key in these treatments. If you skip a dose or take it at the wrong time, it can affect the entire protocol." I obeyed religiously, convinced that each pill brought me closer to my dream of being a mother. In addition to the pills, Arthur gave me vitamin injections twice a week, on Tuesdays and Fridays. Since he was a veterinarian, he knew exactly how to do it without hurting me. He had perfect technique, inserting the needle with a quick, firm movement, injecting the liquid slowly to avoid discomfort. "These vitamins will prepare your body to receive our Daniel," He would explain while disinfecting the injection area with alcohol. They are very special, very concentrated vitamins, only available through veterinarians. They are the same ones we use to prepare competition mares for reproduction. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was a health professional, he had medical knowledge, and he was supposedly the man who loved me more than anything in the world. Besides, I had read in magazines that veterinarians often had access to purer and more effective medications than human doctors. But what I remember most from that time were the rituals before making love. Every night, without exception before intimacy, Arthur would kneel beside the bed and place his hands on my belly. His hands were large, warm, and he spread them over my abdomen as if he were blessing a sacred altar. He prayed aloud with a solemnity that moved me to tears. Lord Almighty God. He always began with the same formula. Bless the womb of your servant Eleanor. Allow the son you promised us on your sacred mountain of Glencoe to be conceived tonight. May Daniel be formed in his mother's womb with health, with strength, with your divine blessing. The prayers lasted several minutes. Arthur mentioned specific details. He asked for the baby to have my eyes, his intelligence, the religious devotion of both. He prayed for a complication-free birth, for successful breastfeeding, for us to be good parents. It was as if he already knew our son intimately, as if Daniel was a real person, simply waiting for the perfect moment to come to us. At the time, those prayers seemed beautiful, even romantic to me. I thought I was lucky to have such a spiritual man, so committed to forming a Christian family. I felt like a biblical woman, like Sarah waiting for Isaac, like Hannah praying for Samuel. But now, 40 years later, it sends shivers down my spine. It was part of his sick manipulation, a way to keep me hooked on the fantasy of motherhood while he executed his macabre plan. Every prayer was a lie. Every word of love was a deception. Every promise was a trap. Because yes, my dears, it was all a plan. A macabre and calculated plan from the first day he saw me in Glencoe. Arthur was not a widower. He was married. He didn't have 3 children. He had 2. His prosperous clinic was a lie. And most importantly, he had had a vasectomy years ago. He could never ever have given me the child I longed for. But I discovered that too late, when I had already lost everything. During the summer months, while I religiously underwent fertility treatments and continued to hope to get pregnant, the phone calls began. At first, they were sporadic, once a week, always in the early hours of the morning. The phone would ring at 3 or 4 in the morning. I would answer in a sleepy voice, and on the other end there would only be heavy breathing before they hung up. They must be wrong numbers. Arthur would reassure me when I commented on these nocturnal interruptions. Or maybe some prankster. Don't mind them, my love. Change the number if it bothers you too much. But the calls continued and soon escalated to something much more disturbing. One July afternoon, while I was preparing dinner, the phone rang urgently. I answered expecting it to be Arthur, letting me know he would be late from the clinic. Instead of his familiar voice, I heard a woman screaming like a maniac. "You wretched hussy!" she yelled at me in a voice hoarse from smoking. "Leave my husband alone. Arthur is mine. We've been married for 15 years. You have to stop calling him. You have to stop sleeping with him." I froze, the receiver trembling in my hand. "Madam," I said in the calmest voice I could manage, "I think you have the wrong number. Arthur is a widower. He lost his wife to cancer 2 years ago." The woman burst into bitter, cruel laughter. "Widower? He told you he was a widower? Oh, you poor naive thing. I am Jane. his legal wife. We live in the same house. We sleep in the same bed when he's not with you. We have 2 children together, not 3 as he surely told you. The woman knew terrifying details about my life. She knew where I worked. Well, where I had worked. She knew I had had endometriosis surgery. She knew I lived in Notting Hill. She even knew my parents' names. Eleanor Vance, she said in a sinister voice. Daughter of George and Elizabeth, sister of David and Sarah. How do you think I know so much about you, you idiot? How is it possible that she knows so much about me? I asked, my voice breaking. Because my husband tells me everything, she replied. He laughs at you, Eleanor. He laughs at how easy it was to deceive you, how naive you are, how you left your job for him. He says you're the easiest victim he's had in years. When Arthur arrived that night, I told him about the call, my hands still trembling. His reaction was one of perfect indignation. Eleanor, my love, he said, hugging me protectively. It's my ex-wife. She's going through a very severe nervous breakdown, a kind of psychotic episode. She can't accept that our marriage has definitely ended. His explanation sounded reasonable. It even partially reassured me. She has already tried to commit suicide twice because of me, he continued in a pained voice. That's why I haven't legally divorced yet, because I'm afraid that if I push too hard to finalize the papers, she might harm herself again. Her siblings have begged me to be patient until she is more psychologically stable. I even felt sorry for that poor woman who supposedly couldn't get over the loss of her marriage. Arthur assured me that he would talk to her, that he would explain that there was no turning back, that he had found true love with me. I don't want you to suffer because of the mental problems of a sick woman, he said. Your peace of mind is my priority. But the calls intensified dramatically. Jane called me every other day, always with new and disturbing information. She told me that Arthur had enormous debts, that he was being sued by several banks, that the Prosperous Veterinary Clinic actually belonged to another veterinarian, and he was only employed by the hour. And by the way, you idiot, she yelled during one of her cruelest calls. Do you really think you're going to have children with him? Don't you know he's had an operation? He had a vasectomy 5 years ago, after our second child was born. Everything he tells you about baby Daniel is lies. This revelation hit me like lightning. Vasectomy, operation. That night I asked Arthur directly. My love, he said with a look of genuine surprise. Are you really going to believe a woman who clearly has serious mental problems? If I had had an operation, do you think we would be doing all these fertility treatments? Do you think I would spend my money on medication and vitamins? Do you think we would pray every night asking for our son? His logic seemed irrefutable. If he knew he couldn't have children, why would he maintain this elaborate charade for months? Why would he put me through all those treatments? Why would he spend money on medications? Why would he pray every night, asking for the child he knew would never come? I decided to trust him and dismiss that woman's words as the product of a sick mind. But September brought new problems that I couldn't ignore so easily. The accounts began to show alarming discrepancies. Arthur, who supposedly covered all the apartment expenses, started asking me to use my credit cards temporarily to cover basic expenses. It's just until I get paid for some big jobs I have pending in London, he explained with a worried expression. You know how it is being self-employed. Sometimes payments are delayed for weeks or even months. Rich clients are like that. They pay when they want, not when they should. At first, they were small and seemingly justified amounts. £200 for groceries, $500 for the electricity bill, $300 for gasoline, but soon they turned into thousands. My Visa card, which had a limit of £50,000, was maxed out in a matter of weeks. Don't worry, my love. Arthur would reassure me every time I expressed my anxiety about the money. As soon as I get paid for the London jobs, I'll pay you back everything with interest. I'll even give you something extra as compensation for the inconvenience. He also convinced me to buy a new car. The argument, as always, sounded logical and full of paternal love. Eleanor, your old Minnie is too old and not safe. When we have the baby, we'll need something safer, more modern, with better protection. Systems. He was right that my car was old and had started having mechanical problems. But the Vauxhall Astra we chose cost much more than I could afford. Almost £200,000. A fortune for me at that time. We'll put it in your name because I have some temporary problems with the tax office due to some wrongly declared invoices. He explained with a solemn face. But don't worry, I'll take care of all the monthly payments. It's my gift to you, to us, to our future child. By October, there were a number of clear warning signs that, for some incomprehensible reason, I refused to see or interpret correctly. My 2 credit cards were completely maxed out. There was a car financed in my name that cost more than I could afford, and I had been out of work and without my own income for 4 months. But the most worrying thing was that, after 6 months of supposed intensive fertility treatments, I was still not pregnant. I hadn't even had a missed period to give me hope. Every month when my period came, I felt my heart break a little more. Give it time, my love. Arthur would console me when I expressed my growing frustrations. Sometimes these processes take longer than expected, especially after a surgery like yours. Your body is healing completely. It needs time to be 100% ready to sustain a pregnancy. To distract me from my anxiety about fertility and finances, Arthur enrolled me in a very expensive personal development course called the Synthesis Method. It cost £15,000 for a weekend, but he insisted on paying for it. It will help you eliminate emotional blockages that may be preventing you from conceiving, he assured me. Often infertility is psychological, not physical. The Synthesis Method was a kind of intense and brutal group therapy where they yelled at you, humiliated you, and taught you that anything bad that happened to you in life was your own responsibility. If you don't get pregnant, it's because you have emotional blockages. The main instructor, a bold and aggressive man, yelled at me. If your relationship has problems, it's because you're not being a good partner. It was a psychologically violent experience. But in my desperate state, to be a mother, I clung to any hope, however remote. You have to accept your responsibility for everything that happens to you. They hammered into me for hours. If you don't have children, it's because deep down you don't really want them. If your partner treats you badly, it's because you're provoking it. It was at one of those seminars that I participated in what they called the baby dynamic. It was the most intense moment of the course, reserved for women seeking to get pregnant. They made me lie on the floor in the middle of a circle of about 50 people, and everyone began to place their hands on my belly. "Come, baby! Come, baby! Come, baby!" They shouted in unison as I cried on the floor, overwhelmed by the emotional intensity of the moment. "Daniel, come to your mommy. Eleanor wants to receive you. Come now, Daniel, come now." It was an indescribable experience, as if 50 people were praying for my fertility at the same time. I left that dynamic completely, renewed, full of hope and conviction. Now, yes, I thought as I drove back home, After this, now I will get pregnant. All those positive energies, all those prayers cannot be in vain. But November arrived and there was still no sign of pregnancy. Moreover, things considerably worsened in all aspects of my life. Arthur could no longer maintain the facade of having money or financial stability. The car payments were overdue. Credit cards were completely unpaid with interest accumulating daily. And he no longer had credible excuses. It's temporary. I swear on all that is sacred. He insisted with less and less conviction. In December, I'm going to close a very big deal in Scotland. Something related to competition horses. It's a contract that will give me enough money to pay everything we owe and also buy our own house. It was also in November that the strange episodes began that I now recognize as the first attempts at poisoning. One night after returning from Sunday Mass, Arthur prepared a passion fruit juice for me with special care. I saw him in the kitchen squeezing the fruit, adding sugar, stirring with a silver spoon that had belonged to his late wife. "It will help you relax, my love," he said, handing me the glass with a tender smile. "You've been very tense lately, very worried about things you can't control. This juice has natural vitamins that will calm your nervous system." The juice tasted strange, more bitter than usual, with a metallic aftertaste I couldn't identify. But I didn't give it much importance, because Arthur had also poured himself a glass and was drinking it with me. "It's a bit acidic," I commented. "It must be that the fruits weren't fully ripe," he replied. A few minutes after drinking it, I started to feel very strange. Everything was spinning. I had the sensation of floating in water, as if my body had lost weight. Colors seemed brighter, sounds more intense. "I feel weird," I told Arthur. "It's normal," he reassured me. "Your body is relaxing after so much accumulated tension." What happened next is blurry, but I have fragments of disturbing memories. I remember compulsively braiding my hair, something I had never done in my adult life. They were fine, complicated braids, as if my hands were moving on their own following a pattern I didn't control. I also cleaned the entire house from top to bottom, even though I had just cleaned it that same morning. I mopped the floors twice, cleaned the windows until they shone like mirrors, obsessively organized all the closets. It was as if I had a manic energy I couldn't stop. The next day, I found that I had written nonsensical letters to several friends. They were long, incoherent letters, talking about things that had happened years ago, mixing childhood memories with recent events, making strange connections between people who didn't know each other. My handwriting was different, more childish, as if a child had taken control of my hand. "It must have been some fungus in the tropical fruit," Arthur explained when I told him what had happened. "Sometimes fruits that come from far away carry microscopic fungi that can cause mild hallucinations or unusual behaviors. It's not dangerous, but it's better not to drink passion fruit juice for a while." His explanation sounded scientific and plausible. As a veterinarian, he had knowledge about natural toxins and the effects of different substances on the body. "It was probably a mild allergic reaction," he added. "Your immune system is a bit weakened by the stress of these months." 2 weeks later, Arthur offered me some pills that were supposedly going to help me concentrate better and have more energy. "They're special vitamins for the brain," he said, showing me a small cardboard box. "A client of mine, who's a doctor, recommended them. He says they're excellent for women who are under a lot of emotional stress." The pills were small, white, with no identifying marks. "What are they called?" I asked. "They're generic," he replied. "But the active ingredient is the same as in the expensive brands. They'll give you more energy and mental clarity. Exactly what you need right now. That night, approximately an hour after taking the pill, a strange and deep drowsiness came over me. It wasn't the normal tiredness after a long day, but something much more intense, as if my brain was gradually shutting down. I feel very strange, I told Arthur. It's normal. He reassured me. They are very potent vitamins. Your body is adapting. During that night, I had the disturbing sensation several times that someone was moving me in my sleep. It was like partially waking up and feeling my body being manipulated. But when I opened my eyes completely, Arthur was sleeping peacefully beside me, breathing deeply with the sleep of the just. The next morning, I woke up feeling as if I had run a marathon during the night. I had aches all over my body, especially in my arms and legs, and a general sense of unease that I couldn't explain. It's probably side effects of the vitamins, Arthur reassured me as he served me breakfast. It's normal when the body is adapting to new nutritional supplements, but the strangest thing, and what I now recognize as the moment my life was in greatest danger, happened in the 3rd week of November. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling a sharp, stinging pinch on the side of my right leg. The pain was so sudden and intense that I immediately sat up in bed. When I fully opened my eyes and looked towards the side of the bed where Arthur slept, I saw him standing beside my side of the mattress with a syringe in his right hand. The light coming through the window from the street partially illuminated the scene, and I could clearly see the metallic object shining. "What are you doing?" I asked him, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Arthur jumped as if he had seen a ghost, clearly not expecting me to wake up. "Eleanor, you scared me terribly," he said nervously, quickly hiding the syringe behind his back. I was giving myself this diazepam injection for the back pain I have, but I dropped it and accidentally pricked you when I tried to catch it. I'm so sorry." His explanation didn't convince me at all. Why would he give himself an injection in the middle of the night? And why next to my side of the bed, not his? And why had he initially lied, saying he had dropped it when I clearly saw him holding it firmly? "What exactly is in that syringe?" I asked with a firmness I didn't know I possessed. "Diazepam," he replied too quickly. "To relax my back muscles, which are spasming." But when I looked at the bedside table, I saw a glass with a whitish liquid that hadn't been there when I went to bed. "And what's that?" I asked, pointing to the glass. Arthur followed my gaze, and for a moment I saw genuine panic in his eyes. "Oh, that's to mix with the diazepam. To dilute it so it's not so strong, so it has a more gradual effect." Something in his tone of voice, in his obvious nervousness, in the way he avoided my direct gaze, set off all the alarms in my head without him realizing it. While pretending to be dizzy from the supposed accidental prick, I took the syringe and the glass and hid them under the mattress on my side of the bed. "I feel very dizzy," I said, feigning weakness. "I think I'm going back to bed." Arthur watched me closely for several minutes before returning to his side of the bed. The next day, when Arthur left early for the veterinary clinic, I immediately called my friend Sarah and told her everything that had happened. Sarah was a nurse at St. Bartholomew's Hospital and had medical knowledge that I didn't. "Eleanor," Sarah said in a grave, worried voice, "that man is drugging you. What you describe are classic symptoms of systematic poisoning. You have to get out of that house right now and report him to the police immediately." But I couldn't completely believe it. The man who loved me, who wanted to have a child with me, who prayed for me every night, who had given up his life in Manchester to be with me, trying to drug me. It was unthinkable, impossible to accept. Sarah, I said. Maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe it really was an accident. Maybe I'm paranoid from the stress of these months. But Sarah was inflexible. Eleanor, listen to me carefully. Men who poison their wives don't start with lethal doses. They start slowly, with small doses that cause strange symptoms, but not immediate death. It's a form of control, of gradually weakening you. Her words were seared into my mind like fire. That night, when Arthur returned from work, I asked him directly about the injections. But this time, I was prepared to hear inconsistencies in his answers. Arthur, I need you to tell me the absolute truth, I said, looking him directly in the eyes. Why did you have that syringe last night? What are you really giving me in those vitamin injections? His face changed completely. For a moment, the mask of a loving man fell, and I saw something that chilled me to the bone. Coldness, calculation, something akin to pure malice. But he quickly recomposed himself like an actor regaining his role. Eleanor, I can't believe you're asking me that after everything we've been through together, he said in a pained voice. After all the sacrifices I've made for you, for us, for our future. I'm trying to help you relax because you've been very tense, very stressed. Stress is the #1 enemy of fertility. But I no longer believed him. That night, without him realizing it, I poured the vitamins he had given me into a small bag and hid them along with the syringe I had kept the night before. I also secretly called Sarah and asked her to bring me a small video camera that could be easily hidden. If he's really drugging me, I told Sarah, I need irrefutable proof. No one will believe my word against a respected veterinarian without concrete evidence. Sarah brought me the camera the next day, a small portable video camera that could be hidden behind books on my bedside table. On November 30th, a Thursday, Arthur told me that the next day he would stay on call at the clinic all night, as he supposedly did once a month. It was my perfect opportunity to look for more evidence and document everything I had discovered. When he left on Friday morning, I meticulously checked all his drawers, his veterinary bag, his personal documents, anything that could reveal the truth about who this man really was. What I found left me completely speechless and changed my life forever. In his bag, there were dozens of ampules of different medications: diazepam, ketamine, propofol, acepromazine, all medications used to sedate animals in veterinary surgeries. Some I recognized because I had seen documentaries about veterinary medicine on television. But the most disturbing was a small black leather notebook where he had written down doses, dates, and effects of what he had been administering to me. 5 milligram, dia pla 2 mil ket, 15 or 11, prolonged drowsiness, mild disorientation. 10 milliarnos dia, 2011, satisfactory effects, no nocturnal awakening. It was a detailed and scientific record of how he had been systematically poisoning me for months. There were also notes about my behavior. Growing suspicion after the 2211 episode. Need to be more careful. Greater physical resistance than expected. Increased dose, gradually. It was like reading the diary of a mad scientist documenting experiments on a laboratory animal. But the worst was yet to come. Among his papers, I found documents for the car's life insurance. It was an insurance policy covering accidental death and permanent disability, and according to the contract, in case I died or became disabled, Arthur, as my common-law husband, would receive the compensation, £500,000, a fortune at that time. I also found correspondence with lawyers that showed he had lied about absolutely everything. Not only was he still legally married to Jane, but he had enormous debts with several banks, was being sued for fraud by at least 3 people, and the prosperous veterinary clinic actually belonged to another veterinarian, and he only worked there by the hour when needed. But the final blow was finding a medical document from a urology clinic in London. Arthur had had a vasectomy 5 years earlier, in 1978. The operation had been successful, and his sterility was permanent and irreversible. He could never, ever have given me the child I longed for. That night, I recorded a video with the camera Sarah had brought me. I sat on my bed, surrounded by all the evidence I had found, and spoke directly to the camera, as if it were my will. "Today is December 1st, 1983, I said, looking directly into the lens. "My name is Eleanor Vance, and I am 30 years old. The man I live with, Arthur Sterling, is systematically drugging me with veterinary medications. I have the evidence here with me." I showed the ampules one by one, read fragments from the notebook, explained the life insurance policy, showed the vasectomy document. "If anything happens to me," I continued, "if I turn up dead or they say I committed suicide, it's a lie. Arthur is gradually poisoning me. I don't know exactly what his plans are, but I know my life is in danger." I hid the videotape in a place where I was sure Arthur would never look, inside a box of tampons in the bathroom cabinet. I also hid copies of the most important documents in different places in the apartment. On Saturday night, December 2nd, Arthur returned from his supposed night shift. He was different, more nervous than usual, more agitated. His eyes held an expression I hadn't seen before, as if he were making an important and irreversible decision. "How are you feeling, my love?" he asked me in that falsely sweet voice that now sent shivers down my spine. "Did you take the vitamins I left on the nightstand?" I lied and told him yes, even though I had flushed them down the toilet a week ago. "Perfect," he said, smiling. But there was something sinister in that smile. "Tonight we're going out to celebrate. There's a classical music concert at the Royal Albert Hall here in London. I've already bought the tickets, they're front row seats." It was strange because Arthur had never shown special interest in classical music. And besides, we were in London, not Barcelona. When I asked him about this confusion, he said he had gotten the tickets through a special client, and that it was worth the trip. "It will be a very special night for us," he said with an intensity in his voice that alarmed me. "A night we will never forget." There was something in the way he said it that made me feel like he was talking about a farewell, as if it were the last time we would go out together. The concert was beautiful, I have to admit. Mozart, Vivaldi, Chopin, my favorite composers, played by an excellent orchestra. Arthur was especially attentive that night, constantly holding my hand, whispering in my ear how much he loved me, telling me I was the most beautiful woman in the theater. "Eleanor," he whispered during the intermission, "I want you to know that these months with you have been the happiest of my life. You are everything I always dreamed of in a woman. Intelligent, beautiful, devoted, perfect to be the mother of my children." The way he said it, with so much emotional intensity, made me feel that something definitive was about to happen. After the concert, he suggested we go for a drink at an elegant bar near the theater. "To end the night perfectly," he said, "I want this to be an evening we remember forever." The bar was sophisticated, with dim lights and soft background music. We ordered 2 glasses of red wine, a fine Bordeaux that cost more than we usually spent. Arthur toasted with an almost religious solemnity. To our future, he said, raising his glass. To the child who will come soon. To a lifetime of happiness. Together. His eyes shone with an intensity that at the time I interpreted as deep love, but which I now recognize as something much more sinister. We drank slowly, savoring the wine and chatting about the concert, about our plans for the future, about the child we were supposedly going to have. I felt strangely relaxed, even happy. For a moment, I thought that maybe I had exaggerated my suspicions, that maybe Arthur really loved me, and everything had been a terrible misunderstanding. But when we got up to leave, I felt my legs weren't responding as they should. I must be more tired than I thought, I told Arthur, leaning on his arm. Of course, my love, he replied in an excessively tender voice. It's been a very long and exciting day. Let's go home so you can rest. The last thing I clearly remember is climbing the stairs of our building in London. Arthur had to help me because I could no longer walk well on my own. My legs felt like jelly, my vision blurred, and I had a strange sensation of observing everything from outside my own body. Don't worry, my love, Arthur whispered as he helped me up each step. We're almost home. Soon you'll be able to rest in your own bed. There was something in his tone, a kind of satisfaction, that caused me deep unease despite my altered state. After that, I only remember disconnected and terrifying fragments. Being in bed, feeling someone moving me. Distant voices I couldn't understand. A horrible sensation of suffocating without being able to breathe properly. Moments of panic where I tried to scream, but no sound came from my throat. The next thing I clearly remember is waking up in a hospital. There were tubes in my nose helping me breathe, wires connected to my chest monitoring my heart, and a headache so intense it felt like my skull was being hammered from the inside. Where am I? I asked in a hoarse, barely audible voice. A young and kind nurse immediately approached my bed. You're at St. Thomas's Hospital in London, she replied with a reassuring smile. You've been in a coma for 3 days. We're going to take good care of you. 3 full days of my life had disappeared. I had lost 72 hours without any memory, as if I had been temporarily erased from existence. What happened to me? I asked, confused and terrified. The nurse looked at me with a strange expression, a mixture of compassion and something that seemed to be discomfort. Your husband says you tried to commit suicide, she said in a low voice. He says you took an overdose of medication. But now that you're awake, the doctors will talk to you to better understand what happened. I froze completely. Suicide? Me? It was absolutely impossible. Never in my life had I even considered the possibility of taking my own life. I had problems, yes, but I also had hope. I had plans. I had dreams to fulfill. That's impossible, I told the nurse with all the strength I could muster. I didn't try to commit suicide. I would never do that. I need to talk to the police immediately. The nurse wrote something in my medical history and told me that the doctor would come soon to talk to me. Meanwhile, she added, your husband is in the waiting room. He's been here for 72 hours, not moving from your side. It seems he loves you very much. The idea that Arthur was there, waiting for me, pretending to be the worried husband, filled me with absolute terror. When Dr. Jones arrived in my room an hour later, he explained that I had been found with extremely dangerous levels of benzodiazepines and other sedatives in my blood. Ms. Vance, he said with professional gravity, you were very close to dying. A little more medication, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. I immediately told him that I hadn't taken any medication voluntarily, that my fiancé had been drugging me for weeks, that I had hidden evidence in my apartment. The doctor exchanged a meaningful look with the nurse. "Ms. Vance," the doctor said carefully, "when you arrived here, you had recent injection marks on both arms. Not just one, but multiple punctures. Your husband told us you were diabetic and administered insulin, but blood tests don't show diabetes or traces of insulin." My heart began to pound so hard that the monitor started making noise. "Doctor," I said, grabbing his hand desperately, "that man is poisoning me. I have hidden evidence in my apartment. Veterinary medications. A notebook where he writes down the doses he gives me. Documents proving he has been lying to me about everything." The doctor nodded slowly. "It also caught our attention that he brought a bag with medications that you supposedly took," he continued. "But the medications he showed us don't exactly match what we found in your blood. There are inconsistencies that worry us." At that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I was in mortal danger and that Arthur had tried to kill me. "Doctor," I said with all the clarity I could muster, "don't leave me alone with that man. Don't let him into this room unsupervised. My life is in danger." The doctor assured me that they would take all necessary precautions while investigating my case. "Calm down, Ms. Vance," he said. "You are safe here. We will do all necessary tests and contact the appropriate authorities." When Arthur came to see me 2 hours later, he was no longer the same man I had met in Glen Coe. His mask had completely fallen, revealing what had always been beneath: coldness, calculation, pure malice. He no longer pretended love or concern. "Eleanor," he said with a smile that chilled my blood, "I'm glad to see you're awake and that you're going to recover completely." He approached my bed and whispered in my ear so the nurses couldn't hear. "I hope you've learned your lesson. Next time you want to do something silly like try to commit suicide, think twice." "I didn't try to commit suicide," I said, looking him directly in the eyes without blinking. "You drugged me. You tried to kill me. And I have proof." Arthur burst into a cold, cruel laugh. "Poor Eleanor," he said with false compassion. "The medications have affected your mind more than I thought. No one will believe those delusional fantasies. You are a woman with fertility problems, jobless, with enormous debts, who just discovered that her fiancé cannot give her the children she so desperately wants. Everyone will perfectly understand why you decided to end it all." But Arthur had made a fatal mistake. He didn't know that I had hidden irrefutable evidence, that I had recorded a video explaining the whole situation, that I had meticulously documented his lies and his crimes. When my parents arrived at the hospital that afternoon, I told them exactly where to look in the apartment. In the bedroom closet behind the shoe boxes, there's a bag with veterinary medications, I explained. In the bathroom, inside a box of tampons, there's a videotape where I explain everything. On the nightstand under the mattress, there are documents proving that Arthur is a con artist and a liar. My father, accompanied by my brother David and Sarah, went to the apartment that same afternoon. What they found confirmed all my accusations and more. Arthur had cleaned out most of his things, but he hadn't found all my hiding places. They recovered the ampules of veterinary medications, the notebook with the dosage notes, the life insurance documents, proof of his vasectomy, and most importantly, the video where I detailed everything I had discovered about his lies and his attempts at poisoning. When the police arrived at the hospital to interrogate Arthur, he stubbornly maintained his version that I had tried to commit suicide. Eleanor was very depressed about not being able to have children. He told the officers she had lost her job, had financial problems, felt like a failure as a woman. But when the police showed him the evidence we had recovered from the apartment, his story quickly began to unravel. "Those medications are for my work," he insisted desperately. "I'm a veterinarian. It's normal for me to have them in my professional bag." He couldn't explain, however, why he had my initials next to the doses and dates in his personal notebook. He couldn't explain why he had lied about his marital status, about his finances, about his ability to have children. He couldn't explain why he had taken out a life insurance policy in my name that benefited him. What most impacted me during the police investigation was discovering the complete truth about who Arthur Sterling really was. He wasn't a widower, as he had told me. He was still married to Jane. His wife was not a scorned ex with mental problems. She was his accomplice in a sophisticated criminal operation. They had been defrauding vulnerable women for years using the same perfected method. He would seduce them in places where it was easy to learn their emotional weaknesses: spiritual retreats, support groups, therapy centers, churches. Then he would exploit those vulnerabilities to gain total control over their lives. Jane was the one who did the preliminary investigation work. She would pose as different professionals: marriage counselor, life coach, social worker, to obtain detailed information about potential victims. It was she who had obtained all the data about my personal life, my family, my financial situation. Also discovered that Arthur had lied about absolutely everything he had told me about himself. He didn't have a prosperous veterinary clinic. He worked as an hourly employee at a clinic that belonged to another veterinarian. He didn't have 3 children. He had 2. He didn't live in an elegant house in London. He lived in a rented apartment that was about to be repossessed for lack of payment. And most painfully of all, he had had a vasectomy 5 years before meeting me. The divine revelation about our son Daniel had been a calculated lie from the very beginning. He could never, ever have given me the child I so desperately wanted. The police investigation revealed that Arthur and Jane had perfected their criminal method over the years. They had defrauded at least 8 different women, although not all had gone as far as I did. 2 of them had died, one supposedly by suicide and another by domestic accident. Now we know they were murdered. The pattern was always the same: identify vulnerable women with savings, seduce them using their deepest emotional weaknesses, isolate them from their families and friends, make them economically and emotionally dependent, and then eliminate them to keep their assets and life insurance. In my case, they had used my desperation to be a mother as the main hook. The revelation about the child Daniel had been perfectly calculated after Jane investigated my medical situation and discovered my struggle with infertility. The trial was an emotional ordeal that lasted 2 full years. I had to relive every moment of terror, every manipulation, every lie. Arthur and Jane had expensive lawyers who tried to discredit my testimony, suggesting that I had invented the entire story to cover up a true suicide attempt. But the evidence was overwhelming. The veterinary medications, the notebook with the doses, the video I had recorded, the falsified documents, the pattern of behavior with other victims. In 1985, Arthur was sentenced to 25 years in prison for attempted murder and aggravated fraud. Jane received 20 years as an accomplice. But the damage to my life was already done and irreversible. I had lost all my savings, my stable job at the bank, my apartment, and most painfully, my dream of being a mother. The doctors explained that the poisoning had permanently damaged my liver and kidneys. The chances of getting pregnant, which were already slim due to endometriosis, were now practically nil. At 32, when Arthur finally went to prison, I was a completely different woman from the one who had entered that retreat in Glencoe. Distrustful, physically ill, emotionally shattered, and without hope of realizing the dream that had defined my entire adult life. The first years after, the trial were the darkest of my existence. I fell into a depression so deep that I could barely get out of bed. I couldn't work. I couldn't socialize with men. I couldn't even drink a glass of water without wondering if someone had put something in it. I lived with my parents, who took care of me as if I were a small child again. My mother prepared my food. My father accompanied me to medical appointments. My siblings took turns keeping me company when fear paralyzed me. Psychological therapy slowly helped me rebuild my life. Piece by piece, I learned that I had been a victim of what specialists call extreme psychological manipulation, or brainwashing. Arthur had used very sophisticated techniques to control my mind, to make me doubt my own reality, to turn me into someone completely dependent on him. The therapist explained that it wasn't my fault for falling into that trap. Manipulators like Arthur, Dr. Smith told me, are experts at identifying and exploiting the emotional vulnerabilities of their victims. They use our deepest dreams as weapons against us. It took 5 full years before I could work stably again. I got a job at the local library in London, a quiet and safe environment where I could be surrounded by books instead of unpredictable people. Books didn't lie, didn't manipulate, didn't poison. They were safe havens in a world I had learned to see as potentially dangerous. Little by little, I regained fragments of my confidence. Although I never became the same confident and independent woman I had been before meeting Arthur. I learned to live with invisible but permanent scars. In 1990, 7 years after the horror, I met Matthew. He was a librarian like me, a quiet, honest man with no pretensions or secrets. At first, I wanted absolutely nothing to do with romantic relationships. But Matthew was extraordinarily patient with me. He courted me for 2 full years before I even agreed to a formal date outside of work. He knew my entire story from the beginning, because I told him during one of our first conversations. "Eleanor," he said after listening to everything, "your past doesn't matter to me. All that matters is the future we can build together. If you give me that chance." We got married in 1993, exactly 10 years after my nightmare with Arthur. The ceremony was small, intimate, just close family and a few friends. I was 40, and Matthew was 38. We both knew it was a mature love, built on solid foundations, of mutual respect and deep understanding. Although we couldn't have biological children due to the aftermath of the poisoning, we adopted a precious little girl named Lucy. When she was 2 years old, she had been abandoned by her addicted parents and needed as much love as we needed to give it. Lucy gave me the opportunity to be a mother in a way I had never imagined. I hadn't carried her in my womb, but I carried her in my heart from the first moment I saw her. She was a shy, scared child who had lived through terrible experiences for her young age, but she gradually blossomed in our home full of love and patience. Now Lucy is 37 and has given me 3 beautiful grandchildren. Daniel. Yes, I finally had my Daniel, though in a completely different way. Sophia. And Alexander. She is a pediatric doctor, happily married, and a wonderful mother. When I look at my grandchildren, I feel that all my years of suffering were worth it to reach this moment of fulfillment. Matthew died 5 years ago, in 2018, after 40 years of absolutely happy marriage. He was the kindest man I have ever known, living proof that after the deepest darkness can come the brightest light. He took care of me when I had nightmares about Arthur, when I couldn't sleep for fear of being poisoned, when terror paralyzed me for no apparent reason. He never raised his voice, never pressured me for anything. never made me feel less of a woman for not being able to give him biological children. Eleanor, he would tell me when I had anxiety attacks, "You are the bravest woman I know. You survived something that would have destroyed much stronger people. You are my heroine." His words were medicine for my wounded soul. Arthur was released from prison in 2008 after serving 23 years of his sentence. By then, I was 65 years old and had a completely new life. I learned of his release because the police informed me in case I wanted to take additional security precautions. But the man who had once terrified me no longer had any power over me. I had learned to be happy despite him. I had built a beautiful family. I had found purpose in helping other women. He was 75 when he was released, an old and broken man who no longer posed any real threat. Jane died in prison in 1998, as I learned from the newspapers. She supposedly committed suicide by taking an overdose of medication she had somehow obtained inside the prison. When I found out, I felt neither joy nor sorrow, only a deep relief that she could no longer harm more innocent women. Over these 40 years, I have personally met other victims of Arthur and Jane. During the trial and afterward, 8 more women appeared who had suffered their scams to different degrees. Not all of them went as far as I did, but all were scarred for life. I met Eleanor, a 50-year-old widow who had lost £50,000 and had been on the verge of losing her home. Sarah, a 40-year-old divorcee who had been drugged for months until she had permanent neurological problems. Mary, who had lost custody of her children because Arthur had made her seem mentally unstable. 2 of them died before we could stop Arthur. Emily, supposedly by suicide after losing all her savings. And Clara, by a domestic accident that we now know was murder. When I think of them, I feel guilty for having survived when they could not. I have dedicated a large part of my adult life to helping women who have gone through similar experiences. For 20 years, I have worked as a volunteer at a center for victims of domestic violence here in London. My story has become a powerful educational tool to show how manipulators can use our deepest dreams as weapons against us. I give talks in schools, universities, community centers, explaining the warning signs that all women should know. If a man tries to separate you from your family and friends, I tell young women, if he controls your money, if he knows your deepest vulnerabilities and uses them to manipulate you, run. Don't walk. Run as fast as you can. I have also written a book about my experience, published by a small but serious publisher. It's called The Poison of False Love, and it has helped many women recognize dangerous situations before it's too late. I receive letters from readers telling me how the book helped them escape abusive relationships. What hurts me most, even after 40 years, is remembering how Arthur used my faith against me in such a cruel and calculated way. He knew exactly how to exploit my spirituality, how to turn my most sincere prayers into instruments to destroy me. The revelation about the child Daniel was the most diabolical manipulation of all. For years, I couldn't go back to a church without feeling panic and nausea. I had to rebuild my relationship with God from scratch, learn to separate true faith from religious manipulation. It was a long and painful process, but I gradually regained my authentic spirituality. God does not send vipers to spiritual retreats. Father Thomas, the priest who helped me in my spiritual healing, once told me. But sometimes vipers dress as angels and enter where they haven't been invited. That doesn't mean God isn't present. It means that evil also exists and tries to contaminate what is sacred. Now, at 70 years old, I can talk about that terrible time without my hands trembling or my voice breaking. But for decades, every time someone offered me a drink, every time I took medication, every time I trusted someone new, I relived the terror of those months with Arthur. I developed what psychologists call post-traumatic hypervigilance. I obsessively analyzed every gesture, every word, every facial expression of the people around me, looking for signs of deception or danger. It was exhausting to live in a constant state of alert, but it was my survival mechanism. The most important message I want to leave young women is this: trust your primal instinct, that inner voice that tells you when something isn't right. If something seems too good to be true, it probably is. If a man appears as the perfect answer to all your problems, suspect him immediately. Predators like Arthur are experts at identifying what we desire most and using it as bait. In my case, he used my desperation to be a mother. In other cases, they can use loneliness, financial insecurity, fear of abandonment, the need to be loved. They study our vulnerabilities like scientists and then exploit them mercilessly. I also want you to know that it is possible to survive what seems impossible. I was minutes from dying poisoned. I lost everything I had materially. I spent years unable to trust anyone, but I built a new and beautiful life. I had a happy 40-year marriage, raised a wonderful daughter, met my grandchildren, found purpose in helping other women. Umvala did not win, although for long and terrible moments it seemed that it did. Life gave me a second chance, and I took full advantage of it. Arthur tried to steal my life, my dignity, my ability to love and trust. What he didn't know is that within every woman, there is an indestructible force that no man can completely break. That mysterious force allowed me to wake up from the coma when doctors had no hope, gave me the courage to testify against him despite the fear, sustained me during the darkest years of depression and reconstruction. It is the same strength that all of you have, even if you sometimes don't know it. Look, my dear daughters, I have lived 70 years in this complicated world, and I have seen everything. I have seen the purest and most calculated evil, but I have also seen infinite goodness. I have seen how true love can heal the deepest wounds, how family can rebuild what enemies destroyed, how hope can be reborn, even after total despair. Arthur tried to convince me that I didn't deserve to be loved, that I was defective for not being able to have children, that I was lucky he tolerated me. Matthew showed me the complete opposite for 40 years, that I was worthy of unconditional love, that my worth did not depend on my reproductive capacity, that I was beautiful inside and out. Now I spend my days in this house that Matthew and I bought 30 years ago, surrounded by photos of my true family, my beloved books, my genuinely happy memories. Lucy comes to visit me every week with the children. I have close friends in the neighborhood. I go to Mass on Sundays without fear. I tend my rose garden that blooms every spring without fail. It's a simple, quiet life, but it's my authentic life. It's the life I built after Arthur tried to destroy me completely. Every morning I wake up in my own bed, in my own house, free from fear and surrounded by genuine love, is an absolute victory against him and everything he represented. Sometimes, when I can't sleep on winter nights, I wonder what would have happened if I had died that December night in 1983. Arthur would have collected the life insurance. He would have told his story of the depressed woman who committed suicide because she couldn't have children. My story would have been different, just another female suicide statistic in the newspapers. But God had other plans for me. He saved me so I could tell this complete story, so I could warn other women about the dangers that exist, so I could prove that one can be completely reborn after total destruction. My survival was not a coincidence. It was purpose. Every time I see news reports of women who have been manipulated, scammed, murdered by men who pretended to love them, I think of how many Eleanors there are in the world right now. How many women are going through exactly what I went through 40 years ago. That's why I keep telling my story, even though it hurts to remember, even though it's emotionally exhausting, even though sometimes I would prefer to forget completely and live in peace. Because if my terrible experience can save even a single life, if it can make one woman recognize the danger signs and escape in time, then all the suffering will have been worth it. I am no longer afraid of Arthur. He is an 85-year-old man now, if he's even still alive. I have built an emotional fortress made of true love and beautiful memories that he can never touch or contaminate. I won the war he started against me 40 years ago. This is my complete story, my dear daughters. A story of profound horror, but also of heroic survival. Of total destruction, but also of miraculous rebirth. It is the story of a woman who was about to die poisoned, but chose to live fully. Who lost everything, but found something infinitely better. If you ever find yourselves in a similar situation, remember my story fondly. Remember that you can survive anything, that you can love again after betrayal, that you can build a new and beautiful life from the ashes of the old. But above all, remember that you are never, ever completely alone in this struggle for life and dignity. True love exists. Authentic goodness exists. Justice eventually arrives. You have to have patience, courage, and faith that light always conquers darkness, even if it sometimes takes longer than we would like. I am living proof that miracles happen, that second chances exist, that life can be beautiful even after hell.